Welcome back! Today we're going to be talking about an art movement. Now, before we get into what it is and what it's about, I should probably explain what an art movement actually is. So let me tell you all about it. When I say an art movement, I'm talking about a specific time in history or modern day today where a very specific type of artwork came around. When I talk about artworks from our time period, people that are making art today, we're talking about contemporary art movements. So art movements that reflect our time period now. But when we're talking about, say, Surrealism, we're talking about an art movement that happened in the early 1900s. Surrealism was an art movement that was specifically related to our creative potential with our unconscious. Surrealism. Now that's a lot of crazy words in a big sentence that probably means nothing to most people. So let me explain a little bit better. When I say we're releasing creative potential of our unconscious, I'm specifically referring to our brains. So our unconscious is the part of our brain that is working when we are not. So when we're asleep, for example, in our dreams, our unconscious is working to create those dreams. And you might be very aware, if you've had dreams of your own, that dreams are not always so realistic. I'm sure many of you have had dreams that you woke up and you were like, there's no way that would ever happen in real life. And that's what Surrealism was partially about, was tapping into that unconscious mind, our dream world. Thinking about things that are irrational rather than real.
Surrealism.
Yeah. They would focus on objects and ideas that inspired them, just like any other art movement. The difference being that it was about things that weren't so real. Usually art up to this point was very much inspired by things that are realistic, or things that at least already had been put into the world, ideas that we already kind of were familiar with and comfortable with. But our brains, they had a different idea. So these images from Surrealism were very bizarre and unique and special. So to talk more about what Surrealism is, we're going to look at an artist from the Surrealist movement. He was really well known. He's the one that we're all going to think of right away when we think of Surrealism, and that is Salvador Domingo Felipe Jacinto Dali Dominique. Salvador Dali for short. We'll just call him Dali. That's a lot easier, isn't it? Well, Dali was really well known for not only his paintings, but his face. He was really well known for his curly, crazy mustache and his really outgoing, crazy personality. Now, that personality very much reflected in his artwork, so let's take a look.
So this is The Persistence of Memory by Salvador Dali. This is one of his most well-known and most recognized works of art today. So we've talked about how these works of art had a lot of unrealistic, crazy, bizarre, unique styles. In this work, we can see that there are clocks in some kind of a desert. They're melting all over the place. We know first and foremost that clocks don't work like that. And why on earth are they in a desert? And do you see ants everywhere? I mean, this is really wild, isn't it? If we look even closer, you can see that in the middle there's almost the face of a man. Not everybody can see it all the time, but there's definitely a face down there with a clock melting over top of it. So he's got this really wacky, unique style to his work. I mean, he's pulling together all kinds of different well-known objects and landscapes to create something completely new. In this artwork, also by Salvador Dali, we notice some very basic things that we all should recognize. We can see that he's got a good sense of the landscape. I can see a foreground, middle ground, background. I can see that he's got the sky painted in with a sunset-looking-ish color, and I see elephants. So what's so weird about that? Oh, did you also notice the elephants look a little bit funny? I don't know. It's almost as if they're like taller than usual. You know what I mean? Do you see that too, or is it just me? Well, anyway, This artwork shows us a lot about what Surrealism is and what is going on in the head of Mr. Dali when he's creating his works of art. It's a very dreamy, unrealistic, fantasy kind of image, and that's what we're talking about today with Surrealism.
So you're probably wondering what we're going to do with this information. So we've talked a lot about what Surrealism is and about some of the artists from that time period, specifically, if you remember his name, Salvador Dali. What we're going to do with this is we're actually going to be creating our own surrealist work of art. But we're going to be a little bit more honed in on one topic. So when we think about his one painting, you remember the elephants with the really long legs? We're going to focus on animals for this project. So we're going to create our own surreal animals. When we're doing this, obviously I'm not going to just draw my pet dog or a fish or a cat, but I might just put those things together to see what I can do with them. So perhaps I have an animal that is part cat, part dog, part fish. And that might look a little bit wacky, but isn't that kind of the point? We're looking at irrational, crazy, fun things, not something we would see in real life. So you gotta think outside the box. Think of some different types of animals. Take a minute to think for a little while. You can even write it down or draw pictures of different types of animals that you know already. Maybe you take the time to look up different animals that you aren't familiar with. There are already animals that kind of defy our idea of logic already, such as the okapi from Africa, which looks very much like this bizarre zebra, deer, giraffe thing, but it's actually a real animal. Or the platypus, who kind of appears to be part duck, part beaver, part I don't even know what kind of animal. Mammals don't lay eggs, but somehow the platypus does. I feel like Salvador Dali might have invented the platypus. Anywho, we're going to be doing that of our own and creating our own animals. So let's take a look at a few examples, and then we're going to look at a quick demo on my own version of this. So let's get to it. Surrealism. Surrealism. Say it again. Surrealism. Maha. Yeah. Surrealism. For our animals today, we're going to be thinking about combinations, which means we're bringing a bunch of different ideas together and combining them to create a work of art. So for my animals, I was coming up with some different thoughts I had on what I could make, and I really liked the idea of using that platypus that we talked about. I really wanted to use that weird duckbill he has. So let me think about the head of a cat and the duckbill of a platypus. Let's get even more into this. Let's think about what kind of a body do I want this guy to have. I feel like we've got two very small-ish animals. Maybe let's go big. A swan or a duck, a bird. That'd be pretty cool. And then for feet. For our animal, I have part platypus, part cat, part swan, and part human, remembering that people are animals too, so we can absolutely use parts of a person to create our combination hybrid animals. Remember to add that texture in there to make it look more fluffy. For example, if it has feathers, more furry if it's a cat with fur. Remember that its bill on this platypus is very smooth, actually, so I don't really need to add a whole lot to it, but I do want to make sure that I make my lines really nice and clean and straight. Then I added a little bit of fur on his feet as well because, you know, people can be furry. I don't know. You could have some leg hair. Who cares? Everybody's furry. So that's it for our animal. I want you to be able to go in, add some color where you see fit. It doesn't have to be realistic. Remember, this is about surrealism. That's all about the irrational, unconscious brain. So we're going to add some color however you feel. It can be a crazy rainbow animal if that's what you choose. But you make that decision. Don't worry about the background. Behind our animal, all of this empty space, that's what we're going to worry about tomorrow. Until next time, Remember always that you are so smart and so important and so very, very loved. See you next time.